This tutorial is going to help you get started creating the queen chess piece. This is the drawing for the queen chess piece and probably should be the place that you start. If you notice, there are three views of the chess piece here. We have a front view, a top view, and a bottom view. And then we have some information down here, which is always generally where you want to start. Sometimes the information in here can be very fundamental to inform you about things you need to do in the project. First off, one of the things I notice here is it says all measurements in millimeter. So the first thing I do when I create a part file is going to be set it to millimeters. And it's not given, but we can see that all these dimensions have 2 decimal places. So I want to also put that in. So let's go ahead and do that. I've got a new part file. I'm going to go to Tools, Document Settings, and set this to millimeter. And then I also want 2 decimal places instead of 3. Now I have the right dimensions. I can start creating that object. If you start creating that object in the wrong units, it's going to be problematic to go back later and change it. So make sure you do it at the beginning. Now, I want to kind of see what are some strategies to approach this object. I know with a Revolve feature, I'm essentially drawing half of this front profile. And since I have most of my dimensions on the right side, that's probably the way I'm going to attack this. I have some height dimensions on the left, which are going to be crucial. And generally what I like to do is start from the largest dimensions and kind of work my way down. So the first thing I'm going to do is put in my axis line, and that's going to be 58 millimeters long, and it extends all the way from the top of that little ball down to the base. So that's going to be number one. Number two is I'm going to put this X dimension in here, this base dimension that is 12.7 millimeters, and that's a radius. So don't cut that in half like it's a diameter. So let's put those two in. I'm going to start a sketch, put my line down the middle, let it snap vertical. Go ahead and dimension that. 58. I'm going to go ahead and do my baseline. 12.7. All right, so now I have the base anchored on my workspace. So if I have some green arcs later, if I pull and prod those arcs, it's not going to pull my entire object around the screen. It's just going to move those green objects. Now I have a few ways I can approach this. I can approach this by attacking the top area, the crown first. I can attack the base area first. But notice I have a large arc in here that's 45 millimeters in radius, and I have a dimension for a center point. It might be wise to go ahead and put that dimension in right now at the beginning because it is so large. And it'll help kind of break up the bottom below that arc and the top above that arc. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now at this point, I can still move stuff around because it's green, so do it now while you still have it movable. And just kind of get it in the right place. I can also move these endpoints because I'm pretty certain it doesn't extend quite that far down. And I think there is actually a dimension that controls the top endpoint. So let me double check that. So if you look right here, I have a dimension that correlates to that at 52.8, and that goes from the base to the top of that arc. Okay. Now I don't believe I have anything on the bottom, but let me check because you never know. All right. So no, there's no vertical dimension here. The dimensions that will constrain the bottom of that arc are going to relate to these other features here. Now I do have lots of dimensions here, so I should probably only be required to put in a couple constraints to make this all work because I know we're still getting comfortable with constraints. But probably the most important thing is for you to keep referring to the drawing to make sure that it's looking right. Your eyes will give you a lot of information about these shapes and tell you if it's looking accurate or if something's way off. And if it's way off, then delete some dimensions, delete some constraints if you need to, and pull and prod those green arcs to kind of get it in the right spot. Then when you put dimensions in, it should help it kind of stick and keep it looking like it's supposed to. So what I would recommend is start with the large dimensions and then focus on one area like the bottom, then work your way up through this area here, and then move on to the crown. Now keep in mind that this top feature, the scallops in the crown, so to speak, come from a second step. Do not try and do them in the initial revolve. That is an extruded cut that you have to create this shape as a second step. And then probably your last step is going to be putting this text on the bottom, but that should be really easy. The one thing I want to note is the size of that text is given. If you put your text too small, our 3D printers will not print it very well, so make sure it's at least 5.5. And if you have room and want to make it a little bit bigger, I'm not going to penalize you for that. So that's our look at the chess piece object. If you have any questions, please ask. Once it seems very complicated looking at it, but if you take it step by step, it's very, very doable.